Hey guys, it's Debbie Potts, and I am back to talk to Dr. Vincent Pedre. I just realized looking up his bio that we talked almost a year ago. Suddenly, it's a year later. I don't know where the time goes, but he's a medical director of Pedre Integrative Health, and he's the founder of Dr. Pedre Wellness, CEO, founder of Happy Gut Life. He's worked in many different roles, but he has spoken last time about the gut SMART protocol. And now we're going to talk a little bit more about the vagus nerve and the gut brain connection and how this can decrease stress, improve focus. And we're going to talk about intuitive potential. And I think gut health is so important as I do functional lab testing with my clients and genetics and looking at their nutritional therapy assessment of signs and symptoms. It's so fascinating to me to look at the whole picture and collect all these different clues so we can put the missing pieces of a puzzle back together to help a client be thriving as they age and not struggling. And I think we forget that we don't have to feel this way. This is not your new normal. And maybe you don't even realize you're not at your full potential and you're just accepting how you are. It's just that's how you age and that's genetics. But there's so much we can do. And what I do with clients is focus on gut health. So we do the functional lab testing. I like to do the wheat zoomer, a gut stool test if possible, and food sensitivities, put that together, looking at a comprehensive blood chemistry panel. And then if they've done some genetics, I like to throw that in there as I'm doing the Wild Health Fellowship. I'll be adding more information on genetics in the future on the show. And ideally, if we can do in person, I do the resting metabolic rate and their exercise active metabolism test to really get a full picture of, are you thriving? Are you doing everything you can do today to improve your future self? And as I am the second half of my life, after I've turned 50, I'm really focused, as I talk about every single show, on improving my health as I age, looking at my longevity markers and figuring out what I can do to get stronger, faster, and more powerful as I age and not accept the whole I'm getting older lame excuse that's always driven me crazy as a trainer, drove me crazy as a trainer, listening to clients going, oh, I'm just getting older. I can't do this. I can't do that. I can't move as well. Well, that's choice. And so if you're listening to this, you probably are interested in being a health optimizer and doing what you can to feel your best, move your best, and perform your best in life each day, and not wait until we are struggling to get help because it might be too late then. And then you're just given a medication and you're not looking at the root cause. So we want to work on what I call the holistic method, looking at nutrition and your exercise and your mobility, your sleep and your stress, your movement throughout the day, not sitting more than an hour at a time. So it's movement throughout the day, not all at once, getting 10,000 steps. And then we want to look at gut health, as we're talking about today, and how you can restore your microbiome. Also, we always want to look at hydration and looking at element T. I have that in my water throughout the day, adding those good electrolytes so you're balancing your minerals. And then a really important part, and we'll talk about happiness today, but happiness is one of the 8 elements of what I call the holistic method that I work on with clients when we need to. It's looking at gratitude, being in a good mood, being positive, laughing, having a good time, doing what you love to do each day. And hopefully your job is fun and you enjoy it as I do, and you're following your purpose and you have a mission in life and you're passionate about things that you do. Hopefully you are on that path to improve your future self by recreating your current self now. So Vincent will talk about this gut brain connection. I know you've heard me before talk about vagus nerve, but I think it's always good to learn something differently and maybe a new perspective of how the gut and the brain are connected. So let me bring on Vincent and we're going to dive in to the gut brain connection. Okay, I've got Dr. Vincent on the show and I'm loving to talk about longevity, as I was just telling you, and gut health is really one of my favorite topics. So I reached out to talk to you and you happen to have a new program. So let's talk shop, Dr. Vincent.
So great to be here again. I love your background, by the way. Speaking about like what's good for mood, like getting sunlight.
Yeah. And you have that when you're in a glass house in San Diego. Usually it is. I was just telling you and my followers know if you've listened to the last 4 years, I don't know how many other people have their pre-COVID life and their post-COVID life, but my life totally changed from 2020 in February to the last 4 years now. So I am following my purpose and it changed my whole life so I can improve quality of life and not have my crazy schedule I used to have as a trainer and coaching people and running all over. And now I'm just focusing on helping athletes improve themselves as they age. Because I really think as I turned 50, 52, and I lost my dad at 80 years old, I just think all of this is taking ownership of our health now and talking to experts as yourself, like give us these tools to help us be health optimizers so we can thrive as we age and not struggle. So
Yeah.
what are you up to nowadays? I talked to you a year ago. I just saw that was last February and you had the Gut Smart protocol and now you've got a new thing. So tell us what's going on.
So last year my book came out, The Gut Smart Protocol, and thank you so much for supporting that. This has been, I think, a really great resource for a lot of people to
Mhm.
help improve their gut health. And I decided, look, I didn't want to wait to write a new book to put something new out that I feel really passionate about. And can I tell you a story just to tie it in?
Of course, it always means more that you're following your purpose. There's
So this goes back to when I was 10 years old. I'm building a model airplane, and suddenly I cut the wrong way, and the blade comes at me, and I slice my thumb.
not good.
And I'm bleeding everywhere. Like I'm seeing like spurts. It's like a water fountain of blood coming out. So I definitely hit an artery and I'm freaking out. And I run screaming to my mom, like, like, and and then putting a paper towel around it, trying to hold the bleeding. And we rush to the doctor and get to the doctor, and he looks at it. He's like, "You're gonna need stitches." And then starts getting everything ready, brings out a needle, and I'm already starting to be like, I'm in a panic. My heart's racing. It feels like it's gonna jump out of my chest.
Hmm.
Then I get the needle on both sides to numb, and I'm feeling really woozy at this point. And next thing I know, everything is going dark, and then I'm out. And this cycle repeated over and over. So then you're wondering, like, how do I even have the title doctor in front of my name? And that's doctor as in medical doctor, because as a child, I had this huge fear of needles. And I almost didn't go to medical school because of it. But I realized this one very important thing. And I think it shaped my entire career. And it's about the connection between stress and our bodies.
Mhm.
And I realized that you cannot heal a stressed out body.
No, why I live here.
You
Yes.
cannot heal a stressed out body. The problem is that most people think that the pathway to healing, to mental health, is in their head. The truth is that the pathway to your inner Zen is actually through your gut
Mhm.
and through the gut brain connection, the vagus nerve. And I came to really appreciate this that, fast forward 10 years later. So I'm 10 years old. 10 years later, I'm pre-med. I've done really well in school. I'm admitted to medical school, but there's this big elephant in the room. I'm afraid of needles. Like, how am I going to become a doctor? I think of it now as the greatest gift that I received because my parents didn't say, I came back after taking the MCATs and I sat them down and I'm like, this thing about medical school, yeah. I'm not so sure about that. Maybe I'll just go to finance, go to Wall Street. That seems safer to me. And they're like, no, no, no. They gave me a little nudge. They're like, no, you're going to become a doctor. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to be a doctor. And truly, that's where my gifts were. But then still thinking about, I don't know how to deal with this. Like my body rebels against me when I'm in those situations. Alcohol makes me nauseous. Like, and when I'm talking about alcohol, I mean like rubbing alcohol, like when you're in the doctor's office and you're smelling the alcohol, you've got the needles, like all of that made me queasy. I'm like, how am I going to be a doctor? So I started researching what's happening in my body. And this is exactly what is happening to everybody who is chronically stressed, who cannot heal their bodies, who are carrying around tons of chronic health issues. Their body is stressed out. My body was stressed out. I was this type A personality. I did not know how to relax.
We call it
And when,
triple A, not just
yeah,
type A, but triple A,
yeah,
probably right.
yeah, probably triple A, to be like top of my class, to get into medical school, you have to be really competitive. And during that time, so this was 8 months before medical school, I learned about the relaxation response from this book by Dr. Herbert Benson called The Relaxation Response. And I'm super fascinated because talk about like, this was like early biohacking. I wanted to figure out, okay, what's happening in my body? Okay, it's called the autonomic nervous system. Okay, there's a vagus nerve, there's a parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system, and yet it all seems like chaotic, and it seems like it's autonomic, so it's automatic, acting in the background. And I wanted to learn, okay, how do I get this system under my control? And I learned about breath work and meditation. Back then, I didn't know about the gut. And I started training like an athlete, like every day doing breath work, every day sitting in my room and doing meditation. Soon after that, I got into yoga. And just so you know what time this is, so you can kind of put this into perspective of what the world was like at this time. This is January of 1995. Yoga was not mainstream. No one was talking about meditation, and no one was talking about breath work. And here I am locking myself in the room that I grew up in my house, and I'm doing all of this secretly because I've decided this is my thing. I'm going to figure this out, and I'm going to conquer my autonomic nervous system. And I found the way, and I just believed in it because it wasn't like I got results immediately. It's not like like you can't just never train and then go run a marathon, right? Like if you're an athlete, you train your muscle. Well, the brain and the gut brain connection needs to be trained in the same way. I think we now live in this world where everybody wants instant results, and we've lost kind of an appreciation for the process that it takes. And yet, when you honor that process, the results you get are incredible, right? So I conquered my fear of needles. I ended up going to medical school. I stopped passing out with needles, and I felt so empowered because I had changed something internally just by breathing, just by using visualization, no drugs, no medications, just the power of the body. And I knew then that I was going to be a very different doctor than the one that I was being trained to be at in medical school. And there was no way to untrain or unlearn the fact that I had proven to myself that there is another way to hack the body that does not involve medication. And so, fast forward, God, we're like what, 27, 28 years later, I'm bringing that and combining it with my knowledge, the gut-brain connection, polyvagal theory, and put that into a program that I call the Gut-Brain Mastery Program to basically teach people to slay their stress, to master their inner Zen, to improve their mood, and to unlock the intuitive potential within
Love
and
that.
sharpen focus.
Mm-hmm.
So, and really what I realized is that no one's doing this. There's nobody out there. There's a lot of meditation experts. There's people, there's other gut experts out there
Mm-hmm.
besides me, but no one's bringing it together and realizing that you need both, because the brain is actually being controlled by your gut and by what's happening in your gut through signals being sent from the internal organs, and especially the gut and the gut microbiome, up to the brain through the vagus nerve.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it what is the number of every one signal from the brain is 7 signals from the gut to the brain?
It's about
Something
70 to
5.
80% of the fibers, the vagal nerve fibers, are actually pointing back to the brain from the gut. And that's why I think the gut is so important, because I believe that in order to heal your body and brain and your mental health, you first need to heal your gut.
Mm-hmm. No,
And
yeah.
that's kind of what that's what I'm putting out there with this program, the Gut Brain Mastery Program, and teaching people how to master both sides of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do believe that both sides are really important, because what's happening up here is affecting the downstream vagal tone. And in return, what you're eating and what you're putting into your system is affecting what types of signals are being sent back to your brain.
Yeah, I saw this quote today. It's called the elimination diet. Remove anger, regret, worry, resentment, guilt, and blame, then watch your health and life improve. I thought that was so interesting. I was like, yeah, that's it. I mean, you hear so much about how gut health is an issue these days. If you're in functional medicine, it's just, we're all always talking about gut health, but just how to connect, as you're saying, the gut brain connection, the mood. If you feel depressed, you feel anxious, you have resentment in life, you have childhood trauma that you've never dealt with those emotions. I mean, so much of it we need to deal with and figure out the why, but also associate the gut health and with your mood and your symptoms. How do you do intake forms, or do you do testing? Tell us about how you start.
The way I've organized the course is starting with a pre-course assessment. Part of it is a gut quiz, basically taking the quiz from my book. And then the second assessment is a stress score. So gut brain stress score, to figure out where your stress levels are. And I want to get a read before we start the program, because I mean, whoever's listening to this, like, I wish we had an audience and be like, hey,
Yeah,
who's
live
stressed?
audience. Yeah,
Raise your
I'll
hand
put
if you're
it's everybody.
stressed. Also raise your hand if you don't think you're stressed. Some people are like that, but
Hmm.
your body is stressed.
Yeah.
How many people know that their body is stressed when they think in their brain? Like, because there are a lot of people, and I'm sure you've worked with these high performing athletes, right? And I work with some very high performing New Yorkers that are able to handle more than what a normal person would handle. And so they become desensitized
Mm-hmm.
and think that they're not stressed. And sometimes I gotta stop them and be like, do you know your body is stressed out? Like,
Yeah.
do you realize that even if you don't feel mentally stressed, that you're biophysically stressed? You're not getting enough sleep. You're running from meeting to meeting. You're inhaling your food. You're never giving your body that moment it needs to
Mm-hmm.
kind of hit that reset button that's necessary. We so need it.
Yep. I think I've talked about chronic stress because that's what happened to me 2013, and my life has gone down this path because I've been following my passion, help other people avoid getting my chronic stress disease, adrenal exhaustion. from doing too much of everything. And I see people do that all the time. There, in my book I wrote, it's called Life is Not a Race, It is a Journey, and teaching people these external stressors that all might be good, but they accumulate. And that's another topic, everyone doing cold plunges and HIIT training, and they're fasting and sauna and all this acute stress that's good for you in short little doses. Everyone's doing everything and overwhelming the body. Then we have all these hidden internal chronic stressors that we talk about, metabolic chaos in our FDN practitioner program. That hidden is hormone dysfunction, immune dysfunction, digestion, detoxification, energy, nervous system, as you're talking about, that it's everything gets kind of metabolic chaos is you don't know where it's from. It's just that accumulation in that beaker of stress that just comes from external sources and internal sources. But no, what do you do about it? So many people just think they take a supplement. And I always say, can't out supplement poor lifestyle habits. You can't out exercise poor nutrition habits. So we need to deal with the why and
And
change our mindset.
yeah, and I say something similar, that you can't out diet or out supplement a stressed out life,
Yep.
or I
Yeah.
even should say a stressed out body. Because if
Mm-hmm.
you're feeding your body those things, but your body can't receive that. And honestly, I think stress trumps everything. And that's not saying that diet is important, that exercise and movement, those things are key. But I've had those patients where all they're doing is adrenaline pumping
Yeah.
exercise, and they never do anything to bring the system down, to
Mm-hmm.
create calm, to ground. And these have been like women who are on the treadmill for 45 minutes every day, but they can't lose weight, where their body is stressed out.
Mm-hmm. And then they're also doing hour sauna, and they're doing cold plunge, and they're doing yoga, and they're doing like 5 other things a day, probably too, on top of that. They're just trying to, I hear this all the time and see it social media. Everyone's trying to do all these things that they hear about on Instagram or Facebook. And they're just like, oh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. That's good for lifestyle, longevity, biohacking.
But then they are stacking in
Yeah,
all these things, and before
exactly.
you know it, your plate is so full
Yeah.
that you're overstressing yourself. And look, I'm not saying, like, I love cold plunging. I just got back from Miami, and I was basically, my cold plunge there in the winter is going in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's more fun than sitting in an ice
Yeah,
bath.
it's easier
Like,
to
I
get in.
rather I rather be out in nature. Granted that you sometimes have to dodge the jellyfish in the winter in Miami,
Mhm.
but I take my risk. But
Yeah.
I do think that we need some level of balance there.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what I teach in the course is there's certain things that we can do with the diet to hack our nervous system from the direction of the gut to actually reduce the stress response. So it's quite interesting, because when we're talking about stress, we're usually thinking about like how we manage it with mindset, and I think that's super important. But there's also, how do we manage it by the way that we eat? That's
Yes.
also a key. And I think a missing key for a lot of people out there who are sitting, they're stressed. There's a lot of people who are chronically anxious, and they don't know what to do about it. But they don't also realize that the way what they're feeding themselves could actually be perpetuating their symptoms.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. So what are the keys to improving our gut health? I mean, we start north to south in nutritional therapy, how you eat, what, when, why. What do you like to do? Kind of get
Yeah, I
started.
think I think the rewiring is
Hmm.
super important, and I sometimes call it an operating system upgrade.
Yeah.
Like, I tell my
Mm,
patients, okay, the reason that you got here is because of version whatever,
yeah.
3.0 of you. And just like your iPhone or your computer needs operating system upgrades, so
Hmm.
does your brain, because sometimes what's been working before just doesn't work anymore. Or we've accumulated bad habits that are now not serving us anymore. Or what usually happens with people is that what they don't realize is that what worked in your 20s doesn't work in your 30s anymore and doesn't work in your 40s.
Yeah.
I like to joke with patients and tell them that the body is like a board game, except it changes the rules over time, but it doesn't tell you it changed the rules. The only way you can know is by playing the game.
Mhm.
And if
Yes,
you're
true.
savvy enough, you know the things that you need to do to like really, because it really all comes back to basics. But I do believe that rewiring is very important
Mhm.
before you do anything else, because you can do a diet, anybody can do a diet for a couple of weeks, but if you're not rewiring
Yeah.
why you ended up in the place that needed that, then you're just going to bounce back there when the diet is over. And you're going to go back to the old coping mechanism,
Mhm.
maybe the emotional eating, all those things that basically sabotage
Yeah.
your ability to care for yourself.
I find that with people that are always on a diet, right? They just have this whole history of dieting and not be able to lose weight, but you get talking to them and really learn from their story that it started when they're a kid and how their family was, or getting made fun of, or just pressure to be skinny, and all that kind of backfires later on. But you can, I just, let's not work on nutrition until we figure out some other things first. It seems that, yeah, same thing, that if you just start working on what to eat, but you haven't figured out on why you're eating and your relationship with food,
It's
or maybe
never,
there's some deeper.
it goes back and forth. I'll see this. Like they might have one meal where they're good, but then now they're back at home and the Haagen-Dazs in the refrigerator is calling their name
Yeah.
because they've got all this internal angst and all
Mhm.
these things. And like you said, a lot of times it tracks back to childhood. I call that timeline medicine, like
Mm.
looking at the timeline and all versions of you and the moment in that timeline when something happened. Maybe as a child, you were told that you always need to finish your plate of food. You
Mhm.
can't leave anything on the plate. And I had this with one patient where we explored this, and we realized that by being told to keep eating when he wasn't hungry anymore and didn't want to continue eating, he was basically being told what your body is communicating to your brain doesn't matter. What matters is you finish the plate, which means you override your body. And then basically just led to a lifetime of overeating because he was not allowed to listen to his body. That was one thing that when we were raising my son, I was always sensitive to, because I grew up with parents too who were like, finish your plate, like don't leave food on the table, but they weren't super strict about it. So it wasn't like I had to finish everything. And when my son was little, sometimes he wasn't hungry. He didn't want to eat. And his mom would worry and like, he'll eat when he's hungry.
Mhm.
Like, we don't want to, let's not force it down his throat, because that way we can let him learn his own internal regulation systems, and he can let us know if he's hungry. Yeah, it's lunchtime but he doesn't want to eat. He can have a snack later. And usually those were the exceptions, because you also don't want to like have haphazard eating, because that completely confuses the gut microbiome. And that can also lead to weight gain when you're eating one day at this time, another day at this time, one day, another day, you're skipping lunch. Like that is incredibly confusing for your gut. But in those exceptions where, maybe there's a day that you're just too full from breakfast, and at lunch, you're not really in the mood to eat, but you feel energetic, your mind is clear, like maybe then you just have a smoothie or whatever. I think it's important to really listen to the body. I think
Mhm.
that's something, it's almost like a lost art that people have missed, and I think it's tied to even our disconnection from our own intuitive center, which is our gut. I call the
Mhm.
gut the first intuitive brain. And I think it's all tied to all of this, like overriding ourselves to the point where we lose the ability to have that internal communication, which when you think about it, is happening through the vagus nerve, the longest nerve in the body, which connects the gut and the brain and all the internal organs.
So talk about, let's get into that, because I think, getting into the gut brain connection, we talked a little bit, vagus nerve is connected and gives us signals back to the brain. Talk about how that impacts our mood and our stress or energy.
I gotta say first, like it's crazy that in many ways my medical career started with the vagus nerve,
Mm-hmm.
and little did I know that this was going to become like a focus and fascination for me, and such a big impact in the person that I became. One thing about the vagus, which is really like, if you think about how surprising, because I think the vagus is probably the most underappreciated aspect of our good health. And I'll give you an example. So the vagus acts like a tonifier. So it's controlling what's happening internally, and it has a signal, right? I kind of want to say like old telephones, like when you pick them up and they had a ringtone, but
Yeah,
I'm
forgot.
afraid like a Gen Zer is not going to even know what I'm talking
What is
about.
this? So yeah, I even almost forgot that sound.
I could say that, what if your internet signal dropped?
Yeah.
But basically, it's got a certain level of signaling or tone. And when that drops, you get a whole host of diseases. You can get leaky gut, you get indigestion, you get loss of appetite. Things don't sit well in your stomach. Just think of when you were stressed and food felt like it sat like a rock in your stomach.
Mm-hmm.
But it also can lead to things like obesity, depression, anxiety, inability to absorb nutrients properly. So they actually did a study on depressed people and with treatment-resistant depression, by the way. So they're on medications and they were still majorly depressed. And they found that a lot of these people have low vagal tone.
Hmm.
So they took these patients and they used a vagal tone stimulation device to activate that vagus nerve and send a firing signal up to the brain. And 37% of those that were non-responders, so they were on 1, 2 medications for depression, not responding, still majorly depressed, 37 of those reversed their depression just by stimulating the vagus nerve.
But how does that correlate with the adding if good bacteria, if you did probiotics? Because I've listened to that on how that will change their depression as well. So
Yeah.
is that related? The vagal nerve gets stronger because if you did a strengthening
So,
exercises combined with bacteria,
so the
good
vagus
bacteria?
nerve comes down from the brain stem on either side of the neck.
Mm-hmm.
It innervates all of the internal organs. There's the dorsal vagus and the ventral vagus. The dorsal is the one that innervates the gut, everything below the diaphragm. And on those nerve endings, the vagus nerve has serotonin receptors.
Yep.
And so when you break down your food, you're breaking down protein into its component amino acids, and here 5-hydroxytryptophan then is getting used by our gut microbiome to create neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine. But also, this is really interesting because we don't often think about this because it only makes up 1% of the gut are the enteroendocrine cells.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they exert a very powerful influence on the gut. They create like over 20 different active peptides. They also create serotonin, so they're acting like an endocrine organ, but they're just spread all throughout the gut. And these
They're in the mucosal lining
they're
of
in the
the gut.
mucosal lining of the gut. So in the mucosal lining, we've got a whole bunch of different cells. We have cells that secrete mucus. Then we have these enteroendocrine cells that basically secrete things that control appetite. They control signaling through the vagus nerve. So they also produce serotonin. And so the vagal nerve endings from the gut get stimulated, the 5-HT receptors, and send signals back up to the brain.
Hmm. What happens if your mucosal layer barrier is damaged? 'Cause when I do gut tests, so many people have, we do the wheat zoomer and a zoomer type of test.
Yeah, and they
And
have antibodies to zonulin, to actin. They've got
everything.
anti-LPS. So you know they've got leaky gut. So then you know that they're going to have problems with vagal tone because
Mhm.
that's bidirectional also. When you have low vagal tone, then that increases gut permeability as well. So that's
Mm.
one other interesting aspect because we know that gut permeability is controlled by a lot of different mechanisms, including zonulin, which is side of the lining. But the vagus top down now from the brain down to the gut is also controlling gut permeability through just the impulses from the vagus nerve. And the reason we know this is from people who have had a traumatic brain injury. When they go into the hospital, within 30 minutes of a traumatic brain injury, like a concussion where you're out, they lose vagal tone, their gut becomes leaky. Now they've got to increase LPS. They've had a concussion, they're unconscious, and now their brain is going to get inflamed.
Hmm. So crazy. It's just amazing me, always amazes me how the body works. It's just, especially the
Yeah,
microbiome, just how
it's
one
also
layer that.
really interesting that in a sense the body has some redundancies,
Mm.
right? Because there are different pathways that are controlling the same thing. So gut permeability is being controlled from the gut itself and the enteric nervous system, but also through the vagus nerve.
Mhm. All
And
right.
then
So how would you test that? If they're in the hospital, do they do heart rate variability testing and looking at low frequency and high frequency? How do you know if you have poor vagal
in
tone?
in these patients, um, I think they use a sensor
Mm. Hmm.
to sense vagal tone. And then they also looked at gut permeability using endoscopic ultrasound.
How do they just, if it's tone, tap it? Yeah, muscle strength. No, but just
You can
how,
use you can use like the vagal nerve stimulation devices like the gamma core. But for people,
yeah, general
this is,
public.
yeah, these are simple things that you can do like humming, for example,
Mhm.
and things I teach in the course as
Is it
well.
humming, gargling?
Yeah.
Not with
Anything
mouthwash, but.
that creates a vibration
Mhm.
here can help activate the vagus because the fibers go right on either side of the vocal cords.
Now you're
That's,
stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system when you do that, so you're calming the body down at the same time, getting more
you're
para.
calming the body and you're creating balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems.
Mhm.
So that also helps improve things like heart rate variability, right? Because most people are living in a sympathetically imbalanced body. Too much sympathetic, not enough vagal. And I don't think that's going to get any better anytime soon.
You know, I laugh every time I'm at the gym in the morning. We go lift weights at say 5:30 in the morning. And I said today to my husband, Neil, I go, I think we're the only ones without headphones on. And no one talks to each other. We may hi sometimes, but no one has conversations in between their sets anymore. They're all on their phones. And I said something to a guy going, okay, we're the only ones without headphones. If I had my phone, I'd be so distracted and checking emails or texts, and then you're scrolling. And the guy said, well, that's what I do in my recovery in between sets. When you're lifting heavy, you need more recovery time. And I would say, well, do you have to have constant, distraction and letting your brain have rest would not be looking at your phone. It just, I don't know if that's part of it, but I just see that all the time. Everyone's stimulated all the time.
It's
So
it's funny you say that because I'm guilty of that too because I like my music tracks while I'm working out. It puts
yeah,
me into the zone,
we
and I
need
like to just
iPod shuffle back again.
yeah. I just I like to be in my own world. But the other day I went to the gym and my headsets weren't connecting with the phone, and I kept trying, and then I was like, forget it, I'm not doing this. And and then I started talking to one of the guys in the gym and we had a nice conversation. I thought, like, and then another guy, so it's a small gym in the building where I was at. So it was only me and two other guys. The second guy, because I asked him a question because I'd never seen him before. I'm like, hey, are you new in the building? He took his AirPods off, and then we started having a chat as we're working out. Third guy arrives. He has his headsets. He's in his own world. Like no one talking to him. Like he's
Mhm.
like doing his own thing. And I thought the contrast to me was funny because here I am, usually at the gym, I'm that guy
Yeah,
with the headsets, but now because mine wouldn't connect, I decided to connect with a human, and it was way more satisfying than being there in my own world. He's in a, because then it's like we're all like these little islands, and we're
yeah,
pretending that we don't see each other, but we do see each
exactly.
other.
I've worked out in the gym for a long time, and just going to this new smaller gym by our house, I'm just shocked. It's just more obvious to me than a bigger gym where I was last year at the Bay Club, and now it's a smaller studio, and it just no one knows how to communicate. So I'm getting off track, but I just feel that it's just going back to stressors. They all accumulate. I think our life is so stressful, and then we're making our workout and not connecting to humans each day and have that sense of community in all parts of our
And
day.
and
But I think it's
and I
part,
will add that what I find is a disproportionate lack of connection to self
yeah, that intuitive
as
side
well.
too. Yeah. Well,
And
my biometrics, and people stop paying attention to how they feel, that mind body connection.
yeah, and mind and but gut brain connection, which I think is
Oh
really
yeah, I should
important.
say it that way.
And
That's
and
more what
and
it is.
why I think that there's a lot of people like I'm really shocked at how many clients I've helped over the years that almost as if they've lost their intuitive abilities.
That's so true.
They don't know what
Yes.
their body is telling them. They're asking me to tell them what to do.
Mhm.
And I always try to like help. Sometimes I think of myself as a body whisperer. Like I'm
Mhm.
basically an intermediary. Like I'm telling them your body is saying this,
Yeah.
and this is what you should do. But I'm also trying to teach them to listen to and speak to their body because that's where the wisdom is.
Mhm.
What distinguished us from reptiles? When
Mhm.
reptiles evolved and became mammals, the nervous system had to evolve. And if you look at reptiles, like they're not very socially engaged. And then you go into the mammalian kingdom, the nervous system evolved with this social engagement system. And part of becoming a mammal was to get into a parasympathetic state where you're not always in alert because you're raising a human and you have to create a sense of safety,
Mhm.
right? And you live in community and you support each other. So it was really important in the evolution of the nervous system to get out of the reptilian reactive brain and into this more sophisticated nervous system that's able to actually regulate itself and get into a place of safety and connection with others, which
Mhm.
is super important for health.
Yeah. So are you connecting the gut smart protocol into this gut brain connection? Because I'm just going back to improving the vagal tone,
Yeah.
improve that part, but are you looking at the microbiome and pathogens and fungal infection, candida, all that kind of stuff?
That will be version 2
Yeah.
of the program. The initial program that's launching
That's more
is
group versus personal.
yeah, is going to be more of a do-it-yourself, and there's going to be weekly live Q&A calls with me for everybody who upgrades to a VIP.
Hmm.
And then future versions of the program, my dream is to have like a super VIP where we walk them through, look at the microbiome, see what's going on the inside. But initially, there's so much that can be done
Yeah.
just by understanding the basics
Hmm.
and then tailoring the diet. So I'm taking the Gut Smart protocol, but I'm kind of even graduating it to another level because I'm I'm going to be teaching people what I call the anti-anxiety diet. And it does involve the microbiome and involves ways to support the microbiome in order to create more balance in the microbiome because at least one study that looked at this found that if you support the microbiome without talk therapy, without medications for mental health, that you can actually lower people's perceived stress by just focusing on their diet and improving their gut health and improving the gut microbiome. And part of my goal and what I feel super passionate about is not only helping people feel less stress, less anxious, brighter mood, better focus, but also to help people achieve stress resilience.
Mhm.
Like to be able to confront the things that come into their lives and regulate that internal nervous system. And that's part of what I'm going to be teaching, the polyvagal theory and how to regulate the dorsal, the ventral vagus, and balance that with the sympathetic nervous system and understand that it's not a bad or good. It's not like we're vilifying and saying, okay, sympathetic nervous system is always bad. What we're saying is that things become bad when they're out of balance, and teaching people how to regain that balance, because there are moments when you do need your sympathetic nervous system, right? You need that catecholamine surge so you can run, or you're competing in a sport. So it's important to be able to engage that system, but then we've got to
Bring it down.
unengage it, and we've got to get it into the relaxed state, which is the state where the body heals itself.
So what I hear you saying, I'll work on my board certification questions to be a health wellness coach here. What I hear you saying is that you've learned from the Gut Smart protocol that, getting to that advanced stage, you have to do this other stuff beforehand to get results. So if you don't work on what we're saying, the how you're eating, the why you're eating, your relationship to everything you're doing, and work on managing your stress, we need to work on those areas before we need to go to the next level of functional lab testing and doing a gut healing protocol.
Exactly. Starting with the basics, and so many people can get incredible results just by going back to the basics. And
Mm-hmm.
the problem is that people don't know what the basics are.
Yeah.
And what I'm bringing into the conversation is like, look, if you're stressed, there's a way to biohack that stress by working through the gut. And if we can then add working through the brain and the vagus nerve system, then we just magnify the results. And we can completely transform the way that you live in your body and approach all of the stressors that come your way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what are some secret tips you can give us until the program is out? Well, when this podcast comes out, I know it's coming out, but keys to improving our gut health with these different kind of strategies.
Yeah, part of it is I'm going to be actually revealing some of this in my upcoming masterclass, where I give people a blueprint for mastering your inner Zen. Part of it is first really understanding where you're at. I think taking a read of where exactly you're at, 'cause I think a lot of people are completely disconnected where their body is at and how their body is connected to the stress that they are feeling. And then second is getting into training the vagus, right?
Mm-hmm.
And third is developing a plan, going forward, which is really about magnifying your ability to listen to your body and that internal intuitive potential.
Now, I'm sure people are going, well, I have an aura ring and I have my Whoop, but learning, I think Dr. Jay Wiles we had on a while ago, a couple of years ago, but just talk about heart rate variability testing and how real time to look at wearing a chest strap and looking at your LF to HF measurements of your heart rate variability gives a little better biofeedback than an estimate of through your aura ring or Whoop. So anything to add, and people that think, oh, I've got this data here, isn't that helping me? Yeah.
I think we can become over dated, right?
I just said that this morning. Yes.
We can become over dated and lose touch with our own bodies
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
and how we're feeling internally. So I think data is incredibly important, and I use it as a diagnostic tool with patients. And I love all of the biometrics, like the CGMs and even the Oura Ring. Like recently diagnosed a patient with having potential sleep apnea because of the Oura Ring. That was an incredible find.
Hmm.
But at the same token, you also have to listen to your body. Like what feels good, what doesn't feel good. I think that our grandparents knew that. The era that came before the internet, before all of this, is still just connected to like listening to the intuitive cues from the body. The challenge we have in our modern day is kind of like this over biohacking, like you can measure heart rate variability. I can have this ring, then, but you have EMFs and you can do all these incredible things, but don't lose yourself in that where you forget that really the greatest authority on you is already here. It's inside of you.
Yeah. And that's the intuitive part is get reconnecting with yourself and, pushing the alternate control, delete, reset, reboot your computer. You need to do to yourself more often and check back to yourself, which is so hard for many people.
I think that's like I was saying, I think that's the biggest challenge, and that's something I feel really passionate about, is almost like um, retraining intuition and untraining over technology.
You need to go into the woods and do one of those no electricity, leave
Vision,
your Wi-Fi or your phones.
vision quests. I mean, and look, I've had a front center seat to this, raising my son who is now 19 years old, and seeing the challenges of this new generation is so connected to electronics, but also teaching him how to be in touch with himself, the things that
Mhm.
you can't pick up from a phone or from anything,
Yeah.
you know. So yeah, I really think that we've got to bring humanity back to this world where technology is, we're not going to stop technology. And I love technology. Like we're going to keep moving forward. But with the technology, let's not forget that you're not a computer.
Mhm.
You don't have an on-off switch. You
Yeah.
know, you've got a rhythm, you've got a biorhythm, you've got to connect with that. You've got ups and downs. And if you learn how to live within those rhythms and how to respect this beautiful biological system, which I think is a work of art, like
Yeah.
is one of the most elegant machines ever built. If you can learn how to work with that outside of technology, don't lose that human connection.
Hmm.
I think I don't think anything was more salient to me during the lockdown than how important it is to connect with others in person through touch, like hugs, like to really be together. Uh, I
Yeah.
don't think anything can
That's
replace
huge.
that.
No, I can't. You
If
can't.
you take a baby that's a preemie in the neonatal ICU and don't touch that baby,
Mm,
baby's not going to thrive.
wow. Yeah. I can see
Baby
that.
needs the baby needs touch, and they
Hmm.
realize this, because initially those babies were isolated and they started realizing the babies that are not touched don't thrive. So they started touching them, holding them. They need to feel that. That's part of what creates that internal safety. And that's part of what I want to help people do, because we have so many adults walking around in stressed out bodies that their bodies are basically saying, I don't feel safe.
Hmm.
I'm not safe. And if you're not safe, you cannot heal your body. You cannot heal a stressed out body. It's
Yeah.
impossible.
I just was talking to a client about that. Just let's not go to the other parts. Just leave that aside. Let's deal with this. It's so important. So I know we're out of time, but where can we send? We'll put all the links in the show notes, but anything we want to give out verbally, where to find your program?
So the link is going to be in the show notes. It's going to be, you can come join a masterclass where I'm going to be talking about the exact blueprint for mastering your inner Zen using the gut brain, the power of the gut brain connection. And from there, you'll learn about my upcoming program, which everyone, I invite all your listeners to join through your link. So that way I know it came from you and they can honor that you are the source for their wellness. And I really
Yeah.
love the inspirational message that you have, and really what you stand for. Like
Mm.
having been also a type A person, athlete, and knowing, like really understanding what this audience needs.
Yeah. Well, that's what I think we learned the hard way. And you just want to take your story of struggling and you don't want other people to have to go through that. But let's feel like that's my purpose in life, is to help people stop and see those red flags, know when to stop and push reset, reboot the system, and listen, as you're saying, to yourself. So I'm really big believer in what you're talking about, because that's what, I feel like, okay, it didn't just happen March 2013 that I had adrenal exhaustion. There's red flags probably 5 years before that I just pushed through, and
Yeah,
we can help other people avoid that. So good on you for what you're doing. So
absolutely.
thank you so much. Keep it up, and we'll put all the links in the show notes, guys. So look below and you can go check out and sign up for the masterclass.
Awesome.